Good day, gentle viewers. In today's news, things and stuff. This is what I might want to call a slow news day. So what I thought we should actually do today is help calm my potentially broken and anxiety-driven mind by actually not going any news pieces in particular, but rather talk about a bunch of things that I end up dealing with over the course of making these news videos. Or rather, what I am dealing with in this exact moment. Let's peel back the curtain a bit to witness the tiny little bunny rabbit powering my brain with a hamster wheel. Not a hamster, a bunny rabbit. Hopefully that helps you imagine how my brain gets. So without any further ado, let's take a look at a very generalized look at recent news. I am Tristan Gallant and welcome to Glass Reflection. Let's jam. All right, so the first thing I wanted to go over involves a little bit of backstory to how I end up finding things to talk about. I am obviously not one of those old school reporters with like a small little notepad and a flat cap running around asking questions to people somewhat rudely until they give me the info that I need. So to make things easier on myself, I actually have around 5 or 6 sources that I API pull into a Google spreadsheet and manually sort through to find interesting topics. I would show you this, but currently my pull code is broken, thanks to one of my sources being Reddit, which if you didn't know, is currently in a weird blackout situation. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about today. Overly large forum software company and hellspawn of discussion Reddit has recently come under fire for announcing that they plan to charge for use of their website's API. An API is... How do I explain this in layman terms? Okay, so imagine that you have like 2 apps on your phone. One is a weather app and one is a map app. Now, let's say that you want the weather app to show current weather on the map app. To make that happen, the weather app uses an API provided by the map app so that they can talk to one another. An API provides very specific instructions and methods for one app to request information from another. In this case, the weather app can ask questions like, hey, map app, can you give me the current location of where I am? Can you show weather-related information on the map? And the map app, which has its own API, can receive these requests and respond with the necessary information or actions, like it can send back the location data that it was asked for, it can display the weather information on the app based on the request given. APIs are essential because they allow different applications to work together seamlessly despite being made by different people. An API enables a developer to access certain features or data from another program without having to build everything from scratch. If I want to put the weather in my map, I don't need to go and build a separate weather app when I can just pull data from a weather app's API. So in the larger context of the internet, an API allows websites and services to interact with each other. They enable functionalities like social media logins. Because Google has an API available, I can use my Google account to log into virtually every website on the internet right now because they can talk to Google through the API and get that information. I can retrieve data from news sources like I do in my spreadsheet. I could control devices in my home through Wi-Fi because they all can talk to each other using an API. And now Reddit has decided that it wants to charge people to use its API to get information from Reddit, a thing that prior to this was free. There are a lot of apps and services that utilize Reddit's API for a variety of functions, a not insignificant amount of which are not for profit. So to suddenly charge for the API means that these apps, by necessity, have to stop working because they can't afford it. In response to this, many subreddits throughout the internet have recently participated in a site-wide blackout where they closed off their communities in protest. Some for only about 48 hours, others are closed indefinitely until Reddit decides to change their minds. And this affects my news pull. And in fact, so much information that I normally gather on a regular basis just because of how ingrained Reddit has become over the last number of years with the internet, to the point where, like, if I am looking for help on how to do something, or I want some information that is like opinion based, I will almost always add the word Reddit to my Google search terms. I use Google search now more to search Reddit than I do for its actual internet search function. But with the blackouts, it is so much harder to do. So many things link to Reddit articles that are currently unavailable, and it's just a dark reminder of where all the good information on the internet is currently located. Like also the amount of times that I have gone looking for things, and instead of having it readily available on a website or even in a Reddit post, people have decided that, oh, we're just gonna add it to a sticky post in our Discord server. Like, man, I am not going to join 50 Discord servers while I'm digging for what I want. And if those happen to be on servers that eventually close or get mismanaged, man, the internet might have a weirdly dark future ahead of it. So the other things that I deal with when searching for news is the amount of, the best way I can describe it is slop. Pieces of news that is just spread out and dumped into news feeds despite being only useful to a very small audience. For example, I sometimes pull news from ANN's feed, and the amount of press releases from companies who just want to make an individual post for every individual announcement of what they may be doing at a con is maddening. I don't particularly care that Tokyo Pop announced it has panels at Anime Expo. All that is just a press release with their 2 con panels that is only relevant to the people who are going to Anime Expo. And if those con goers cared enough, they would just look at the convention schedule to find them and then use that accordingly. But because it's technically news, it shows up in my feed and I have to sort through it. Crunchyroll powers up for the biggest Anime Expo ever. That's not even written by anyone from ANN. That was written by Crunchyroll. It is advertising for them, by them, and man, I hope ANN got paid for that, because my god. The next bit of things that I have to sort through and deal with is a little bit hard, because I honestly can't say that it's not newsworthy, but it's just hard to present it sometimes, and that is new anime adaptation announcements. Like, it is my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, that a not insignificant amount of my audience does not partake in reading manga that is not translated officially. Now, there may be some people who scour particular websites that use somewhat okay fan translations or now even machine translations of niche manga, but largely I don't think that it would be wrong of me to say that the majority of people watching these videos don't hear about a particular manga until its anime comes out, or somehow the manga gets so popular in English, it just explodes. So when there is an announcement for a manga that doesn't exist in English getting an anime adaptation, and when you consider just how many anime come out every season, that's a lot of them, I have to decide how to present that. And honestly, I think the best way to do it would be to take the time and research what this new show is about, what its manga was about, and try and sell it to people. Except that's what I end up doing in my seasonal videos, and it's far easier to sell a show that actually has at least 1 episode out than scouring the internet for a fan-translated manga that may or may not even exist. So I have to skip those. Then there are like news posts about things that are tangential to anime directly but fall under similar interests. Gaming shows up a lot in my feeds, and I have sometimes commented on that. And there's also not an insignificant amount of VTuber news that shows up in my feeds. Okay. And at the end of the day, you know, like sometimes I do not find things that are interesting enough to talk about. And so much of what I actually end up speaking on in these videos is driven by my own interests, because I can very easily expand on things when so much of like news briefs and that is just very short, very factual, at least most of the time. There are weeks where I wish I was doing a news video like 3 or 4 times a week for how much content there is to talk about. But then you get things like this week, where I didn't do anything earlier this week because I couldn't find enough to talk about. And even today, this is what I came up with because I figured a mini behind the scenes thing was more interesting than whatever marketing slop I could have tried to present otherwise. Thankfully, though, at least once a week, I can always lean on one of my favorite things to do with these news videos, and that is rant about the current weekly anime rankings. So let's do that. But first, before we continue, I wanted to give shoutouts to supporters of this channel over on my Patreon. Because yes, this video is not sponsored, and the more support that we get over there, the less sponsors that Glass Reflection will need at any given time. So an immense thank you, especially to patrons like Sailor Arashi, Hector Montemayor, Wago221, City Yamako, Ryfen Bonaparte, Ross Emerson, and Omar Showman. We can't continue this without your support, so however much you are able to help, I am eternally grateful. Continuing a little bit on the behind the scenes thing, this is where I pause my teleprompter. I have a teleprompter, you see, giving me notes that is directly in front of my camera, and that helps to make sure that I get some things factual, but you know, it doesn't always help. But for the anime trending section, where I go over the rankings, the teleprompter is off. This is all me, baby. Not to say that I didn't write the notes or anything that happened before. It's always all me, but this is a little bit more unfiltered. So I have open on my laptop, because, you know, I have my laptop on the desk next to me. you'll see it has cords plugged into it that I hope I didn't unplug. And on the screen, I have presented to myself what the actual weekly anime rankings is. When I edit this video, I'm going to superimpose that over the video, so it's a lot easier to see what I am talking about. But we're going to go through this, and I've only looked at literally the top 4 because I had to open the webpage. And comparing it to previous weeks, apparently, I was wrong. You see, in previous weeks, I had seen shows like Oshi no Ko and Witch from Mercury obtain the #1 spot. And then I thought that the reason why those two shows specifically got knocked off of the #1 spot is because both of them had a little bit of a down week, a week where they did a recap episode and nobody really paid attention to them for about a week. But I thought that in both cases, as soon as that was over, they were going to come back and probably fight for each other for reclaiming the first spot. So it surprises me that with this week, not only did Witch from Mercury and Oshi no Ko not fight for the first slot, they didn't even fight for the second slot. So Heavenly Delusion is in first slot, which honestly I am surprised of entirely because I don't see people talk about it in most of the places that I look for online, and also it's the Disney Plus show. And it's like, I didn't realize how many people actually had Disney Plus. Apparently that is a thing. But Hell's Paradise is also here, which is also kind of weird, specifically because in this particular week, Hell's Paradise has re-entered the chart. It was not in the top 10 last week at all. And now it has come back into second place, which has forced Witch from Mercury to get dumped down into third. But Oshi no Ko has come back from its week off, and in that, it comes in at fourth. Not any higher. These is very weird to me. Like, Heavenly Delusion is a great show and I've been enjoying it a lot, but I will say, at least at this point, I've been kind of forcing my way through Hell's Paradise. I guess the other thing that I can add into this video is this is actually the third time that I'm going to be talking about the next little section of this chart. You want to know why? Because camera problems and audio problems. And I kept talking because, you know, this is unscripted and I didn't notice that either my camera shut off or that my mic wasn't recording. So now I got to talk about this chart for the third time and specifically remember all of the things I just kind of streamed of consciousness prior to this. So I don't like Hell's Paradise. Now that's a little bit too strong. I was a lot more diplomatic the other times I did this take. But Hell's Paradise came off really strong. I loved it a lot. I thought it was going to be a great entry for the season, and then I've just been slogging my way through it. So it surprises me that it re-entered at second, despite the fact that Oshi no Ko re-entered at fourth. That depresses me, honestly, because I far more enjoy Witch from Mercury and Oshi no Ko. I have no problems with Heavenly Delusion. I think it's a great series. I've been enjoying it. I'm fine with it being in first. I just prefer Witch of Mercury and Oshi no Ko far over Hell's Paradise. Now, everything else beyond that, from 5th down to 10th, that is all romance anime, which I find hilarious. Because in 5th, you got Insomniacs. In 6th is Dangers in My Heart. 7th is Skip. 8th is Kubo. 9th is Raeliana. Yes, Vinland Saga is technically in 10th according to their chart, but we don't talk about that right now. And also tied for 10th is Yamada-kun. Like, you could say that there is a bit of a bias here in anime trending towards romance anime, but I would disagree, because if that were the case, then a romance anime would actually be higher up than only 5th, and also Tonikawa would not be stuck down in 14th, because Tonikawa is an amazing series, but for whatever reason, anime trending dropped it by 4 positions, and now it is in 14th. And that is depressing. Not as depressing, however, as the fact that my favorite anime of the entire season, Otaku Elf, is now in 27th position, having dropped 3 spaces from last week. I guess I'm going to give up on that for going higher than where it was last week, because that's just a pipe dream. It keeps going down. The disappointing thing that I hate even more, though, is that Cheat Skill in Another World, a show that I absolutely despise, and I think it's the worst thing this season, is higher than it. It's in 24th. Now, thankfully, it dropped 9 positions from last week, and I hope it goes down further. It is boring, it is uninspired, it is a power fantasy that is not even interesting in how it presents itself. So many isekai, like, are actual power fantasies, if you just look at their main characters. And, you know, that's fine, it's like part of the genre. But when you do it, I would hope that you would at least do it in an interesting way, and Cheat Skill is not that. Cheat Skill is literally, I woke up one day and the universe just basically hands me everything on a silver platter. Like, that is what happened in the first couple episodes that I watched. Maybe things got better later on, but I doubt it. So the fact that it is halfway down this list just makes me immensely depressed. Let me just put it that way. Immensely depressed. What is wrong with you? And that is it for our show today. So subscribe if you haven't, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, whenever that may end up being, watch more anime and stay frosty.